Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Flowcase live webinar, the 3 bottlenecks slowing down AEC proposal teams, and of course, how to fix them. My name is Emily. I am working with marketing here at Flowcase, and I am joined by our internal superstars, Dipesh Patel, who is heading up our enterprise sales here at Flowcase, and Dave Houghton, who is working with our customer success team, both who are in the trenches with AEC prospects and customers, speaking to them, asking them what's working, what's not. Perhaps you guys have met them before on a call. If so, send a little hello in the chat. Today we're going to be just talking about these 3 challenges, how to fix them. It will be pretty quick, under 30 minutes. We have a few polls that we've tossed into the presentation just to get you guys engaged. So looking forward to that. And you walk away knowing where most of the proposal time is wasted and how to fix it. So let's jump straight in. As you guys know, you can probably relate, AEC proposal teams are stretched thin and the pressure to win while protecting brand reputation is higher than ever. So I'm going to hand it off to my colleague Dipesh, who is going to cover the 3 bottlenecks, and feel free to jump in at any time if you guys have questions or comments. We'll be in the chat speaking with you guys there.
Hey everyone, over to me. Thanks, Emily. It's good to see some familiar names attending today and also some unfamiliar ones. So welcome and thanks for taking the time to join us today. My job entails that I talk to bid and proposal professionals across multiple industries. So that's IT consulting, business consulting, engineering, construction. And there are a few consistent challenges that always seem to surface. Today, what I wanted to touch on were a few nuggets that have been coming up again and again in the AEC space. And that's from boutique firms all the way right through to global enterprises. And I'll be touching on a few of these points just now, and later on in the conversation, Dave, my colleague who works in the customer success team, will walk through how some of these firms are tackling them in practice. But before we dive in, this is a question that I like to ask on a lot of my sales calls, actually, and it's the feeling that you have when you win a bid. What is that feeling? After all of the collaboration, the late nights, the last minute edits, chasing around information, and that shared moment of pride that comes and that relief that comes when you hear that you've been selected. And if you can think about that feeling for a minute, that's the feeling that fuels you to respond to these bids time and time again. You know how painful it can be, how much time you spend on these bids and proposals, all of the challenges that come with that. What keeps you going? It's that feeling of winning. And, reaching that moment is becoming harder and harder in the marketplace from what I hear. And the pressure to win and protect brand reputation is also higher than ever. So while teams are stretched thinner than ever, I think technology comes into play. And that's what really connects to the wider conversation we're having today, because across the firms that I speak to, whether it's a small consultancy or a global player, the drive to win hasn't changed, but the way that teams are having to work absolutely has. So 3 bottlenecks that we'll be touching on today, starting with the first, will be chasing content and information. And, I'm sure that's something that a lot of you on the call spend hours and hours doing, tracking down the right internal experts, the right resumes, the right project sheets, case studies. The content exists, whether that's in people's heads, whether it's on desktops, it's just buried, right, in folders, email, SharePoint. That old stalwart who's been at the company for 30 years, it might be in that person's head. And one proposal manager actually told me recently that we spend more time chasing information than actually writing proposals, which is a frustrating position to be in. The second bottleneck that I come across quite frequently is formatting chaos. And that's related to multiple templates, multiple versions, endless copy and paste. And people spend time fixing fonts and margins when they really should be spending that time refining the story that you're telling to the customer. It's repetitive, it's frustrating, and it can often hurt brand consistency. The third bottleneck, again, I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this, is that there's no single source of truth. Information lives in 10 different places: Excel, SharePoint, drives, network folders, and even when you find what you need, you're not sure if that's current or not. So the teams are working incredibly hard, there's no question about that, but the process itself is what keeps you firefighting instead of strategizing. And I think on that note, Emily, you were going to introduce a poll so you can actually tell us which of these relate. Maybe they all relate.
Looks like we have a few coming in. So we have, yeah, a couple chasing resumes, some formatting templates, some all of the above. Yeah, these answers are not so surprising. I think this is exactly what we hear from most AEC firms, and it's the perfect setup for what Depeche is going to talk about next.
Yeah, so yeah, next up, it's just about how firms can break the cycle of doom, when they are spending too much time on admin rather than strategizing and getting every last point out of that RFP or proposal. And the first point I'd like to touch on here is the firms that are winning this battle are centralizing content. They're bringing that content into one searchable workspace. Everything from resumes to project data to boilerplate text is stored in one area. It's always up to date and it's instantly findable. Secondly, companies are standardizing data where they can, in terms of dealing with some of those prior bottlenecks. And that can be structured around project type, sector, role. So when that RFP does come through the door, they can instantly pull the most relevant people and projects aligning with that criteria. And last but not least, it's the automation piece, automating formatting and tailoring. So this is probably one of the most painful areas. And when there isn't automation around formatting and tailoring, it can take a hell of a lot of time manually editing documents for each proposal, for each bid. So when automation can take care of layout and branding, the impact from what I've seen in the market is huge. Faster turnarounds, better compliance, more consistent polished proposals, and increased output in many cases. So the proposal teams can finally get time back to focus on what really wins, and that's the messaging, the strategy, and the client story. And again, on this point, I think Emily did have another poll, or was that poll later in the conversation, Emily? Was it the key takeaway next before we have?
Yeah. Will come after your next slide, so I'll move on.
Yeah, so I'll be really quick with the key takeaway from my perspective, and then we'll pass on to Dave, who actually works with our clients on a day-to-day basis, from morning till night, implementing some of these key things that break that cycle. But the key takeaway from my point of view is that winning firms don't work harder. They systemize how they're working right now. They reuse and tailor content, and that's where tools like Flowcase, our tool, come in. Where we can help you create that single source of truth, where resumes, project sheets, and case studies, they're always current, they're in one place, they're reusable, and those updates stop eating into proposal time. Formatting becomes automatic, and teams can collaborate on one consistent, trusted version of every piece of content throughout that chain. So it turns the entire proposal process from a scramble into something which is more structured, something that you can work through with confidence, and something that can hopefully end up with you feeling that winning feeling more often. So not just working harder, but working smarter.
Awesome, thanks, Depeche. So we've just published another poll. This is the second to last poll. It's where does your proposal content live today? So we have some SharePoint, CRM and database, yeah, Excel, local folders, dedicated proposal software. So that's actually what Dave is going to talk a bit about. He works with teams who are trying to fix exactly this. So on that note, I will hand it off to Dave.
Thanks very much, both of you. And it's echo what Depeche at the beginning. Nice to see some familiar names on here. And looking at that list, some of you, this is the second or third time we've heard from me this week. So it's nice to know you're not sick of me. So I must be doing something right. So, yes, I work within our customer success team, and with some of our largest customers, onboarding brand new customers, but also work alongside more established teams as well, some of which onboarded with me, some before I joined the business. So naturally, a lot of this will be kind of Flowcase themed, but having spent some time working both sides of the fence in the bidding space, I'll try and include some more independent thoughts in there as well. So in my role now and previously, see firsthand how teams move from either needing or beginning to make an initial plan to deal with some of these challenges, and how they begin to then implement that plan and think more long term, and think about continuous improvement, working on that against some pretty challenging growth targets I hear from people. Obviously, ultimately, we're interested in winning more work, with putting forward the best representation of our experience in these scenarios. So whilst I can't mention specific businesses, I'll try and elaborate a little bit on some of the practicalities and thinking behind how some of our AEC customers are navigating these legacy challenges, and more generally dealing with the bottlenecks and the challenges which Depeche and Emily have introduced already. So when we're first introduced to a new customer, my CS colleagues and I look at a few things to begin with. So we first of all look at what the current challenges are, different for everyone in lots of cases, but with some underlying themes as we're looking at here. So what the challenges are in relation to managing resumes and case studies with the bids and proposals, such as chasing for updated documents, or commonly the reliance on maybe one or two individuals within a team to put together the finished product. We look at where data and documents currently reside, and how sometimes if there's some structure to those. And we usually find there's a mixture of documents in file stores, some data in CRMs, and other back office or legacy systems. And a fairly typical status quo for that existing information that we see is inconsistent resume styles. We see multiple versions, sometimes different languages per person, and on the languages front, not always consistently translated into all the necessary languages, which can be problematic. And we see scattered case studies as well, and some of those only exist either in a document or a presentation, or as I mentioned before, in some legacy system, or a mixture of all of the above. And so you can see how that would be tough to navigate under pressure, as I'm sure is a familiar feeling for many of you. The next thing we do is we talk about a plan to mitigate some of these areas. So we first look at how they want to work with resumes and case studies. So most commonly, as we talked about, is that they don't want to need to chase for new documents for every single bid. Next, we look at what information they want to bring with them, what might benefit from improvement, and perhaps what's no longer fit for purpose. Maybe there's things that you've always done that had a good reason at the start, but don't necessarily carry through to the new or desired way of working. And then lastly, we look at how to create a structured environment for that information that facilitates the way that they wish to work. The target outcome being removing the need to trawl through complex data and systems to produce what is ultimately quite basic information. So give you an example, I'm currently working with a new, and I'd say fairly typical North American AEC customer. They're just in the final stages of implementing with Flowcase, and they have historically been working in the same way that we just outlined. So multiple resumes per person, 4 or 5 different representations of a product or a case study, depending on who you ask, to now having a master version for each, which is ready to go at the point of hit and go on the bid in any of 5 different bid template formats without needing to chase anyone at that panicked 11th hour. So we know, of course, busy people, busy consultants don't always have time to write prose about the work that they've done, and so even with the best intentions, sometimes we see, say sometimes a lot, we see that abbreviations and technical jargon can start to creep in. We also know that the evaluators reading the responses are under their own time constraints and pressures as well, and will probably take some shortcuts to finding the evidence that they're looking for within the documentation they're sent. So think Control F or search on a document to seek out those point-worthy terms or phrases. And even if they're using smart technology to do this, we have to assume that it's the criteria in the RFX that this technology is being trained on. So next, how do we manage this and maintain the quality of the content relevance to bid activity for the future without needing to rewrite entire CVs and resumes each time? It's not just about implementing a system or a workflow, which of course would be the easy thing to fly the flag on, but it's also about knowing how to manage that through changing landscape of bidding. So customer expectations change, templates, requirements, frameworks change, and crucially, evaluation criteria gets updated as well. So our starting point really is thinking of resumes and case studies not as documents as they historically have been, but as structured data. And when you start to do this, and especially when you can get to a position where you can maintain a single master version of each record and then tailor content to suit the bid need at that time, it's then much easier to place it into a template which fits either from a compliance or a branding perspective, as we talked about earlier. But also, you can combine that with the possibility to make collective updates to your data, to keep your content aligned with known evaluation criteria. That combination then begins to touch on all 3 of the bottlenecks that we're talking about. So chasing content, if it's all in one place, one version, that's that neatly handled with. The formatting chaos thing can be templated because you're working systematically now, and having a single source of truth for each is ultimately going to speed things up at crunch time when it comes to the bid submission. So let's say, for example, to bring this to life a little bit, you're going to be submitting resumes for 20 consultants. Now, all of these, let's say they need to evidence experience with a project methodology. They need to show a dozen technologies, and perhaps they need to show a minimum number of different project type experience. And just for fun, let's throw in that also needs to be represented in a couple of different languages. Let's also say that because these historically have been written independently by these people, they're also using a variation of terminology across each. So it's not only complex in that sense for you to present, but also for the evaluator to follow and find the narrative from the main bid response all the way through to the evidence base being the resume content. And traditionally, in order to get that ship shape, you're probably going to be asking internally for 20 documents to be updated by one or perhaps even 20 people on top of the actual response itself. But if you can find these variations and update them centrally and consistently, that's not only a huge time saving, but a big win in terms of the ease of scoring and ultimately chance of ticking off more of those points when it comes to placing that in front of an evaluator. So consistency, to my last point, is the last thing I'll mention here. So our customers naturally, as all of you will be, particularly keen on being able to rely on giving a great first impression with tender responses, whereby your description of your capabilities in that main response matches neatly, as I mentioned, the narrative both in your case studies and in your resumes, which gives you then a really credible read. You're saying, here's what we're great at, here's where we've done it before, and here are the people who've delivered on that. And you can see very clearly where that experience is coming from. Just before I hand back over to my colleagues here, I mentioned earlier that it can be difficult, or alluded earlier to it, that it can be difficult to quantify a time saving, and of course naturally with any new way of working, it's common to see a little bit of resistance to change in any industry. What I can say though is that the people we work with who face the challenges highlighted previously, by working in this data-driven, systematic way, now have the bandwidth not only to deliver their core function of bidding against ambitious growth targets, but by using this data in a structured way, they're also able to do things like actively participate in strategic decision making in things like hiring. They're able to support the pre-qualification stages by enabling the business to stay on top of things like simple things like when do our certifications expire for different people, and also provide more evidence base with this data to bid reviews. Have we actually got the capability on the ground to deliver against this? So hope that was of some interest to run through for some of the practicalities. Now happy to take questions, but otherwise I will hand back over to my colleagues.
Awesome, thank you, Dave. So with that, we're going to wrap it up with one last poll. And this one is, what are your top priorities to improve proposal efficiency in the next quarter? And if any of these 3 lessons that Dave has just ran us through are priorities for you and your company, Dave or Dipesh would be happy to show you more what that looks like in action. So with that, we thank you for joining us today, taking the time to be here. We tried to keep it efficient because I know we're all busy. But again, please reach out if you have questions, comments, feedback for us. We would love to hear from you. Thank you. Bye, guys.